Oh.
All right, you're up.
All right, so we're on, guys. We want to welcome Dave Burns to our club, Lincoln Beekeeper Association, and his friend Patrick. He's going to be talking about nutrition and winterizing bees. So with that being said, we're going to give him the floor.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say hello to all of you here at the club tonight and to everybody on live stream. And if you want to watch this later, if you find out, I kind of like that talk, you can watch the replay of the live stream. So everybody in the audience, say hello to all the people around the U.S. and around the world. Give a shout out. There you go. So welcome. I'd like to say hello to all my live stream participants tonight. And I'd like to thank my live stream and the club here for letting us do both of these at the same time. And our friend Patrick is here to run the cameras. And Jessica, Robbie, and Sheri are working the administration part of the live stream. So appreciate all that you guys are doing. We are going to have a giveaway from the audience here and a live stream giveaway coming up. So don't go anywhere. We are still going to pull off a giveaway a little bit later. So tonight I'm going to jump right into the teaching. Looking forward to sharing tonight with the teaching of winter preparation and about wrapping hives. I get a lot of questions about ask me about wrapping hives and how do you prepare bees for winter. But I want you to know, let me see, I'm gonna grab my microphone here, Patrick, get a little closer to me. I want you to know that there are a lot of different opinions about things when it comes to beekeeping. Is that new to anybody? I mean, if you ask, we've heard that if you ask 10 beekeepers a question, you're going to get 11 different answers. What I like to say about that is it doesn't mean that all but one answer is wrong. I think it means that you can have 10 right ways, 11 right ways to do something. So I want to shift over here to get the lighting a little bit better. There we go. So when it comes to, when we talk about winter wrap, when we talk about feeding bees, there are a lot of different ways to do it. And I'm hoping tonight that I can make a presentation in such a way that you'll see the value and the importance of feeding bees. I know some of you have tried different methods. There's a lot of different things on the market today that we can feed our bees. But I've got some material that I want to share with you that I hope will enlighten you a little bit about feeding bees. So, okay, get my little pointer to change. The top issues facing the bees today. So the top issues today are pretty common, right? We have pests and we have the pathogens that are affecting bees. We have diseases. And the one that I want to talk about tonight has to do with poor nutrition. So as long as we can remember, we've struggled with our bees having proper nutrition. It's been an issue way back. I remember reading literature in the 1800s where people were creating candy boards, ways to feed bees way back in the 1800s. So we've been figuring out, trying to figure out how do we feed our bees. And so poor nutrition is also was one of the leading causes, by the way, of CCD. And you might remember colony collapse disorder. So we found out that poor nutrition was a big factor with colony collapse. You might have gone through that. So let's talk about the diet of the honeybee. The honeybees basically eat what we eat, almost, and that is they consume honey and nectar, and they consume pollen. So the honey and nectar, that's their carbohydrates, And then we get into the pollen being the bees' protein. So we eat carbohydrates, we eat proteins. That's what our bees eat as well. And so, oh, now my clicker is almost working. There we go. So, if we look into, spring, that's when bees really expand rapidly. And, we have bees gathering pollen. That's their major protein source. That's their lipids. And that's also where they get their sterols. And I want to talk about sterols in just a minute because that's really in the news and all right now. That's all. But when they go out and gather things from the nectaries of plants, that's where they get their honey and nectar, their carbohydrates. And that's how they metabolize all that energy to do what they need to do in raising brood and everything. So when it comes to sterols, have you followed the news on this? It's really kind of groundbreaking, okay? So sterols are in the news, they're in bee nutrition, and I want to talk a little bit about it because as I look through different news articles, I see a lot of these articles coming up. And a lot of people have asked me questions about this report about how bees are having a better chance now when this particular product hits the market. I think next year is when it's supposed to come to fruition for the beekeeper. But the scientists actually played around with some yeast, and they used something called CRISPR. And what it is, it actually can go into yeast. This particular yeast they were using is real easy to play with this because it's very food grade, food friendly. And they were able to go in with this CRISPR-9, and they can actually use this tool to kind of take a snippet out of the DNA and play around with this engineering of this DNA. And so they played around with it, and you can see, as it says here on the screen here, that this yeast was selected because it's food safety protein, it's high lipid content, commercial use in agricultural feed. The modified yeast was grown in bioreactors and processed into powder for use in bee diets. And that's kind of fascinating about these sterols. If you're not familiar with sterols, they are found in plants. Bees need these sterols. So they're plant lipids. They're molecules that the plant has that bees gather when they gather the pollen. And so in humans and in most animals, we actually make and produce cholesterol. And we need cholesterol, even though your doctor probably says you don't need a lot of it. We have to have it to survive. And so bees actually use it as well. And that's where since bees can't make this cholesterol, this fatty substance, that's when they go to the plant to gather what they need to continue to have this in their diet, these sterols. So that's what the sterols are. And when you think about it, honeybees lack the enzymes to actually create these sterols in their own body like humans do. And if they don't have these sterols, then the bees can't grow or they can't develop. Now, the easy solution to this, if you don't want to buy this product next year, is to cross your fingers and hope that your bees are going to go out into natural habitat of flowers and gather enough variety of different proteins from pollen and bring it back to the colony and have enough of these, 4 to 6 different types of sterols that bees need. So most beekeepers probably fall back into the category, if you're like me, of thinking, I want my bees to get everything naturally. I'm hoping they will. But let's face it, that doesn't always happen, right? It doesn't always happen with humans either. Most humans are in a deficit of some, nutrient that you need. You may be short on vitamin C, you might be short on vitamin D. That's why doctors test different levels of your blood lipids to find out, do you need a particular type of vitamin or something to boost your immune system or your iron or something. They're always trying to watch all that. And so, I would rather eat most of my things that I need. Like if I need more vitamin C, I would rather just eat, an orange or eat some broccoli or something. I'd like to get my vitamins and my minerals through the food I eat. But a lot of people take one-a-day vitamins, right? This is because we don't feel that we're going to get all the things that our body needs naturally eating the food around us. Some people have that lifestyle. You're not on the go all the time. You don't have to eat at McDonald's when you're in a hurry, and you can grow your own garden, have your own fruit and vegetables, and you do better. That's how we're designed to do, right? So bees are much in that same category. They're designed to go to different floral sources, gather up protein, and away they go with what they need. And so in the pollen, we have these things like proteins, amino acids, lipids, fatty acids, like we talked about, the sterols, the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants. Now, I love talking about water because a lot of people think bees just need water to cool off, right? That, we get hot, we get thirsty, we drink a lot of water because we need to stay hydrated. Bees don't really have a high demand like humans do to stay hydrated. Bees use water in different ways. And I'll talk about that, but I find it interesting. One year, we had our septic tank. We live out in the country, and our septic tank wasn't working as great as it should have been working. And so it was kind of boiling up a little bit onto the surface of the ground, and you could smell it and see it, right? And it's like, ooh, I gotta fix my septic line. Guess what? Bees were all over that water. It was unbelievable. My wife saw that and she said, I'm never eating honey again. I'm not going to do that. But I tried to assure her that the bees aren't gathering that and putting it in their honey. They're using it for other things. But they were after the minerals that are found in that brackish water. We have a big chicken coop, and that little chicken yard around the chicken coop, when it rains just right, all that water kind of washes off all the droppings from the chickens and all, and it kind of flows off, right? Well, all that runoff water from the chicken coop, bees love because it has all those minerals in it that the bees desire. Now, you think your scout bees are smart. And they are. They can go out and find something, and they can tell the whole colony with a waggle dance, hey, I found this great honey spot, everybody, nectar spot, let's all go over there, right? They also know where all the minerals are. They're like detectives. They constantly know your area. So if they need a little more of this mineral, a little more of that mineral, they know where to go to get it because they need all of those minerals as well. So they're always scouting around for things like that. That's how they find these brackish water spots. But in the water, we talk about brackish water. They go to mud puddles, compost bins, chicken houses, sewage. They're getting salt, minerals, magnesium, and potassium from the water, and trace compounds of all of these things for their gut health. I actually did a little experiment this summer. And so I actually went around to a watering bird bath that I filled up to help my bees with getting water. And I went over there and I started marking the bees that were there. I marked 100 or 200 bees, I think, with a little white marking pen. So I didn't use blue because that's what color the queen is this year. And so I marked them with a little white dot. I just daubed them. I didn't have to pick them up or anything. And then I did little experiments like, okay, this one's gone. How long does it take it to come back? About 4 minutes to go back to the hive, deposit the water, come back. And then I would go to the hives and I would open up the hives and I would say, I want to see what the bees are doing when they come back to the water. So I could quickly just watch the entrance of the hive. And when I noticed that white dots were landing on this hive and that hive, I thought, oh, maybe it's just one hive. Maybe it's just a couple hives. All the hives were going for that one water place. I have about 20 hives on my YouTube studio yard that I work out of. And so they were all participating. I would go into a hive, pull up a frame and say, okay, there's the white dot. What is she doing? Where is she going? Where is she going with that water? Majority of them were adding it to the honey. Now, why would you think they'd add it to honey? Well, sometimes if honey, it can actually be too thick. So they add water to it in order to dilute it. So they find a water source to do that. But there are many uses for water. If you look at the PowerPoint here, you can see that they use it to cool the hive. That's probably predominantly what our bees are doing in Illinois. They're cooling the hive. I remember testing someone at Eastern Apicultural Society that was applying for their Master Beekeeper certification. And I happened to notice when they were holding a frame up that I could see a bead of water around every little indentation around the hexagon of the brood area. Like it was capped over brood, but I could see little droplets of water around each cell. So I asked the candidate, what do you think that moisture is around each one of that brood cell there? And he said, I really don't know. And I explained that that was their cooling system. They have to keep their brood a specific temperature, around 92 degrees. They incubate it as capped over pupae, right? And when it gets too hot in there, they use water to put it around that incubating brood, and they fan their wings, and that way they are able to cool off the temperature to keep the temperature in the hive exactly where they want it. It's called evaporative cooling. Bees are experts. I know we try to help them out. We think, oh, I'm worried about my bees being too hot. I need to do something. I need to keep them cool. And so we do a lot of things, or they're going to freeze to death. So I've got to find a way to get them through winter. But I assure you, our bees are quite capable of heating their hive and cooling their hive. They have to work harder at it. I'll give you that. And so what we can do sometimes helps them not have to work so hard at it, right? Just like, you can stay cool, but sometimes you have to work harder to stay cool, right? You got to get in the shade, take some clothes off. In the wintertime, you want to stay warmer. You got to work harder to stay warmer. But this was a little fun experiment of mine. So I want to talk to you about the importance of feeding your bees. If you don't feed your bees the food that they need, it's going to shorten their lifespan. It's going to suppress their immune system. It's going to reduce brood viability, how much the queen lays. It's going to increase their susceptibility to all the different pathogens that they have if we fail to feed them properly. A lot of studies have been done on this. So an average colony will consume about 1 to 3 pounds of pollen a week and about 1 to 3 pounds of honey a week just to function during the busy bee season. So you can imagine that's a lot of honey that they're ingesting, a lot of pollen that they're eating to raise brood for them to grow and develop. And so it takes about 1 pound of honey to make 1,000 bees. That's a lot of honey. And a colony needs, in the season, it needs about 150 to 175 pounds of honey per season. So a lot of people will say, well, how much honey did your colony produce this year? And we always talk about the amount that we took off, right? Oh, they made me 10 gallons or this many, but we never include what they actually also carried in for themselves. So they're making a lot of honey. They're bringing in a lot of bee bread, a lot of nectar. And it takes about 1 pound of pollen to make 4,500 bees. So they use that protein to really make the colony function and grow. So keep all these things in mind. I'll talk briefly about a bloom cycle. For all of us in Central Illinois, those of you watching from around the US, you can kind of make an adaptation of this. But here in Illinois, most people have spring. That's our primary bloom season for me. I love spring. Everything blooms in spring. My bees are going crazy. They're out there on everything, fruit trees. And then after the spring kind of dies down, we get into clover in the summertime and other things. And then we finally lose our clover. Then we wait around for goldenrod, and then goldenrod shows up, and then it finally goes away like it has now, right? So there's this weird kind of gap in our season that most beekeepers don't recognize. And that gap is when bees don't have proper nutrition Now they have stored it in the hive. And so we're trusting that they have enough honey and pollen in the hive that in these seasonal gaps that they can go ahead and go to their reserve and eat, the things that they have put away for winter. And so that's what we're relying on. So I made a little graph of my situation here in central Illinois. And as you see this, I know it's hard to see maybe from where you're sitting or where you're watching on your screen, but let's just start with the first part of the year. So I'll talk more about this in just a minute, but in January, I'm feeding my bees. I love feeding my bees in the wintertime. That's not unusual. That's something that I didn't create. I got the idea from beekeepers in the 1800s when I looked at them feeding their bees candy boards way back. Candy boards are in old time literature, books and all. Anyway, I had trouble keeping my bees well fed, and so I feed them a candy board in the winter months, like January. I start feeding usually December, January, February, and March. I feed them a hard candy. It's not as hard as you think. I cook it to about 248 degrees, and I add minerals, proteins, and all the things that bees want. Protein powder, amino bee booster, honeybee healthy, all those things to get the bees the nutrients they want. I'll tell you why in just a minute. But as I get into the spring, I do have some flows. Early on, I'll have the maple tree that will bloom. That's the first sign of my bees doing something. You can see them up in the maple trees. They're bringing in a little bit of nectar, but more pollen. And then you'll see all the other things especially like dandelions. That's a real marker for me that, okay, it's time to stop feeding my bees because, they're getting dandelions now. You can see bright yellow pollen being brought in, wax being drawn out and everything in that early spring season. And then you have all the other spring things like apple trees and fruit trees start blooming. But there's a point in spring for me, and you may not notice this because there's kind of a lap over of time. But what happens is when all the spring things that only bloom temporarily, like a brief period, like apple trees, and even black locust trees will bloom, but it's only a week or two and then they're done, right? What happens is there's a gap. And if you look at my graph here, you can see this deficit of red. So there's a period in time when the bees still are going out and doing things, but there's been a great reduction of what they were doing. And that affects the colony actually, to go through that seasonal gap. It doesn't last long. And then all at once we're back into clover. And they go crazy on my white Dutch clover. It's everywhere. It's in your yards. It's in churchyards, edges of school, baseball diamonds. Clover is everywhere. This year was just exceptionally wonderful for me in my area, central Illinois, up by Danville, Champaign, where I live. It was wonderful for clover. Did you guys have good clover results this year? It was just popping. You could mow it. It would pop again. It was just awesome. So the clover does good, but after the clover dries up, there is another dearth that happens. And so, it's a brief period of time when it's just kind of gone. And then after it's gone, we go through August, as you can see here, that there's not much going on. In fact, my bees will stop flying after the clover dries up and the goldenrod hasn't bloomed. Not stop entirely, but greatly reduced. And then goldenrod hits, and it's amazing. I've kept bees for almost 30 years, so I have a little experience with goldenrod. I can only remember one year that I made a bumper crop of honey off of goldenrod, only 1 year. And some people don't like the taste of it, so I mixed it in with my other honey to kind of spread it out a little bit. But the bees gather it. It's a great crop to get them going into winter, and it produces a lot of pollen. They can really get going pretty good. So this year was exceptional for me. Guess what day the dearth started? When did the goldenrod end? When did the foraging end? For me, it was October the 1st. It was amazing because the day before they were going crazy. And then I walk outside and you think, oh, your hives died because you don't see any activity going in and out anymore. October the 1st, boom. I mean, it's still going a little bit, but you could tell a big difference. We haven't had our first hard frost yet, but you can see it's really made a difference. So then you see what I do in the spring and March, I feed 1-to-1 sugar water. And if you're really into this kind of stuff, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to this feeding bee thing. I can figure out when my first dandelions are going to bloom, and then I will backdate 42 days, and I will feed my bees 1-to-1 sugar water with additives like protein, amino bee booster, and all the things they need that they would naturally get from plants, right? I feed them 42 days back from when the first dandelion is going to bloom. Why am I doing that? Because I'm getting my foragers prepared for spring. I'm raising foragers. Sometimes that's like in February. So I'm getting my foragers built up. I'm raising brood with this thin syrup of 1-to-1 42 days before I have dandelions. And so I start feeding them, getting ready. But once I start seeing dandelion coming in, I might put my honey supers on. I don't feed bees when I have my honey supers on. So I stop feeding. Then I go through the whole season. Well, over here in the fall, that's when I start feeding them 1-to-1 again. This is the week I started feeding my bees 1-to-1 sugar water. And I'm feeding them, it's a light syrup. I've done this for 15 years. I'm not new to this. I add my protein powder to my sugar water. I don't use pollen patties. It's fine to use pollen patties, but for me, I can get small hive beetles attracted to the pollen patties. And so I put it in my feeder jars on the top through my feeder, and then the bees only consume, through those jars, so beetles aren't attracted to the feed. And so I'm just trying to control it that way, and it helps a lot. So I put all the mixtures in my feed my chart. I'll give you a little secret. You may not know this. Apologize if you know it, I'm boring you. If bees understand that they're bringing nectar from beyond their brood chamber, if they understand they're bringing in nectar from beyond the hive, they work much harder at raising brood. It's amazing. If it's in the hive, like if you have a frame feeder or you're feeding it and they think it's part of the internal life of the hive, they don't build brood up as much. So it's a way of helping them work for it. If you make bees work for their food, like getting it from the jars with those little holes in them, then they seem to raise a lot more brood. And that's what I want to talk to you about and how it works for me. So there's the gaps. That's how it works. So we need the protein. We need all of this to help them really develop and to raise a lot of bees. So let's talk about nurse bees. Nurse bees, roughly between the ages, maybe 5 days, 17, 18 days old, these nurse bees. These nurse bees have hypopharyngeal glands, and so they're able to produce royal jelly. This royal jelly they produce, they feed it to the queen all the time, but they also feed it to 1 to 3 day old bees, or larvae that are developing. So all bees, young bees that are developing as larvae, the first 3 days, they're fed this royal jelly by the nurse bees. Their glands look like a rope. You see, if you had an x-ray of their head, you would see this rope in their head, and it has these grapes on it, grape-looking things. And if the nurse bee is able to consume the proper nutrients that she needs, those nodules, those grapes get full of royal jelly. And then they follow the string down until they can expose it out to the bees, larvae that are developing. If those nurse bees aren't fed well, they don't have the royal jelly they need to feed developing larvae. And this developing larvae not fed well makes really bad adult bees. These bees are smaller. They don't have good waggle dances. They're not accurate with their waggle dances. All this stuff just cascades upon the bees not being good adult bees. So if you see a colony of adult bees that aren't doing well, could be because that's developing larvae, they weren't fed well. It's the same with humans. The developing fetus has to have the right nutrients. Usually mom has to be on vitamins to make sure all the nutrients are there for the developing baby. It's the same way in the hive as well. And so that's really important for gland development. So all of our bees are facing so many different challenges today, and we wrestle with these because it makes sense that we want to keep our yards greener without weeds in them, our fence rows cleaner and all of that, but that's what our bees eat. And so we're to beautify America, we're taking away what our bees need. And I think I'm speaking, probably preaching to the choir, but none of us like to see every dandelion destroyed or every fence row taken out, because we know our bees need that. So that's why beekeepers are working hard to help bees by feeding our bees. Now let's talk about sugar, because when I started beekeeping, I hung out, when I started, there was not the internet, right? And I only had to go by what other beekeepers at the time would tell me. And some of them were very guarded with their information. They wouldn't really tell me too much. But I got a few things from beekeepers I hung around with back then. And they were telling me you need to, if you need to feed your bees sugar water in the fall to help them get through winter. They told me to feed them 2 to 1 sugar water. 2 parts sugar, 1 part water. That way they can turn that into honey or, stored honey for the winter faster. I did that forever. And it really didn't work well for me. It really didn't. My bees still suffered from a lot of different things. So I tried experimenting with understanding that I need to also give my bees protein. And so I tried protein patties. That worked really good until small hive beetles got worse and they were laying eggs in my protein or my pollen patties. So that's when I went to this pollen substitute powder. Now, if you can see here, this is, I think, pretty amazing what bees do with protein powder. Because while my bees were doing, I just throw this on the ground in the fall or the spring, and bees will actually fly over and around it, and they fluff it up in the air, and then they grab this protein powder and they pack it in the back legs, of course, or pollen baskets, and they're there just getting as much as they can. If you set some of this stuff out there now, it would be amazing what your bees would do. Now, they're after sugar water now, of course, but they're really after a lot of protein right now as well. So feeding them this protein, it's amazing how much they want to pack away right now. Okay, so I'm going to skip to this. So my problem was way back in the day when I was trying to figure all this out was I lost a lot of bees dying in the fall. And I don't mean colonies dying, but I would inspect my hive and I would see larvae that was dying in the back of the cell or the bottom of the cell. It was dried out. Dried out because nurse bees were not feeding them royal jelly because the nurse bees didn't have anything to eat to produce royal jelly. And way back then, I remember I brought an inspector out and asked him, and he was good, but he just didn't have any kind of knowledge of understanding about why. He just said, well, they're dying. So anyway, I started researching, I started trying to figure things out and realized the larvae is dying because it's not fed well. And then they get cannibalized by the bees because that's protein. And so the bees loved eating the larvae. And so I needed to have more winter bees. Are you familiar with winter bees? They're called diutinous bees. They're long-lived. Diutinous means long-lived. They live 4 to 8 months. So I'm living in Illinois. I've got about 100 colonies, and my bees are struggling. They could make it through winter, but then they would come out really small. I would have like 10,000 bees in a colony because I live on the prairie. There's nothing between me and like Tennessee, just a straight shot of wind. And it was pounding my hives and they just weren't staying populated well in the wintertime. So I began experimenting with different ways I could overcome these challenges because I would just experience this loss of population of bees in the winter. Another point I want you to really grasp is that bees work by age polytheism, and that means the division of labor that the bees function under. So if you were a bee and you're born, you go through this whole process shown here on the screen, and it's not so much that they're sitting around waiting until they get this old on day 6 or 10, but that's when they start developing different glands. And when they have different glands, then they can do different things, right? And so they just work by this division of labor. Now, the problem is if something goes wrong, like you lose your queen and you have to buy another one. So there's like maybe a week and a half before you get another one or raise one or something. Now in the colony, since the queen wasn't laying eggs for that week and a half, and she can lay 1,000 eggs a day, you're down a large number of bees, 7,000 or more bees, right? That gap from her stopping and the new one taking over leaves a gap in this division of labor. Now, some bees can, it's overlapping. So sometimes it's almost unnoticeable to us, but to the overall colony, it's very noticeable. That gap will come and there'll be, for a moment in time, there'll be less nurse bees, right? There'll be less wax makers, comb builders. There'll be this moment of gap. And sometimes it can be so severe that it can cause the whole loss of the colony because they just can't get ahead again. And some beekeepers, I answer a lot of questions every week here on my live stream and other means. I answer thousands of questions a month. And a big question is, my bees aren't building up. My bees aren't drawing out foundation on my honey supers. I'm having trouble with my bees. They're not building up, Well, that's always a problem with some division of labor that's not there. It could be many division of labors that aren't happening anymore. If the queen's not laying good, the workforce is not there. And even though it's not there today, just think of that gap. It's going to follow all the way through your next 30 days until this whole new group of bees that your new queen is laying finally comes around and gets things going again. So there's just, these gaps can be catastrophic. A lot of beekeepers don't recognize that. Yeah. So how do you identify nutritional stress on your honeybees? Well, the best way is, like I said, if you don't see your frames being drawn out, if they're slow to build up their population, and if you know your seasonal gaps and all the nutritional challenges to your bees, you might recognize it. There could be spotty brood. That sometimes is because your queen isn't fed well. Underdeveloped or dying larvae, low pollen or bee bread stores in your hive. There's a lot of things like this. Foraging on low quality pollen, such as corn. It's really sad if you see your bees, or let me say it this way. It's really sad if I see my bees bringing pollen in from corn, because I know they're desperate. I feel sorry for them. In a lot of my colonies, I've noticed if they do bring corn pollen in, they don't keep it long. They'll get rid of it and just drop it to the bottom board because they don't like it. They get it because they seem like they have to, and they don't like it. So how do we respond? Well, supplemental feeding of sugar water is a good way to respond. I think removing honey supers before you feed, of course, you don't want your sugar water in your honey supers. Pollen patties, you got to watch for swarming beetle if you do that, and always provide a good water source. So I made this Venn diagram that kind of summarizes briefly what I'm saying here, but it says that undernourished nurse bees produce undernourished larvae. They produce poor adult bees, and then it can eventually lead to colony health decline. All because they're not fed well. I know, I'm like you, I want to say they're bugs. They should be able to go out there and get what they need. They should be able to go out there and get all the food that they need. But most of us don't treat our other animals that way. We don't treat our dogs that way. Like, well, it's a dog. They should go out and catch something. You feed your dogs, right? And so we have to be responsible with our bees and really study their needs, what they need to eat. So limited pollen supply as developing larvae. I mentioned this, they die younger, they forage less, they have inconsistent waggle dances. So the way that I combat that is like during a dearth, right now, this is a big dearth time. I want my bees to keep making brood. They've been making brood really good. My hives are so full of sheets of brood, which are diutinous bees in October now. So to keep that going, if I don't keep feeding them, they'll slow down. I don't want them to slow down. I want more winter bees. Guess who makes all the heat in the hive? It's the winter bees. They're the ones that are going to shiver their little muscles and make heat in the wintertime. So the more bees I have in my hive in the wintertime, for me, it works better for them surviving. So I feed my bees. You can see the mixture here. It's kind of an orange looking because I put protein powder in there. I've got Amino B, Honeybee Healthy. And in 26 hours, they cleaned out 3 quarts. That's a half gallon and a quart. So almost in a day, they almost ate 3/4 of a gallon. So that's how much of a demand that they need right now, because they want to keep raising the brood, and I want them to. And so that is my strategy right now. And it's not a secret. This is what I do. I'll take questions at the end. So I feed them in a dearth. I add 1 teaspoon of Honeybee Healthy, 1 teaspoon of Amino B Booster. It's amino, it's protein chains. And then I add 1 teaspoon of the protein substitute powder. I use Ultra B from Man Lake. Sometimes I use Daydance Brood Builder. It doesn't really matter what kind you use. If it's made for bees, it's probably got enough in there to get the job done. But I add a teaspoon per quart of 1-to-1 sugar water in the fall. I don't need to feed my bees 2-to-1. They've got plenty of stores on there. I'm not trying for that. I'm just trying to get them built up to make more bees for winter. Now let's talk about bees of winter physiology, diutinous bees. We don't know what triggers diutinous bees. It could be a shorter daylight. I mean, my goodness, the sun is setting so much earlier now. And the days are shorter, there's less resources out there. All of these things can contribute to the bees cutting back and triggering them to lay to survive this nutritional gap. By the way, diutinous bees, winter bees, we call them, they also occur in some parts of the world that don't have winter, but they have dearths where flowers don't bloom for a period. And in that season, same thing happens. These bees live, they raise bees of winter physiology to live several months until they have another bloom. So it's not something they do just for the winter. Somebody else asked me, well, I have bees, I got some bees in the south. Is it possible that they won't raise winter bees? And I said, oh no, it's not where they're raised. It's more the environment that they live in when they decide to raise bees that can live a long time. So bees are dying in the winter. They run out of food oftentimes. Now, I gathered a lot of data to make all these decisions that would work for me. I bought some electronics here and I put them in a hive. I can monitor the temperature, the humidity, what the bees were eating, and how they were doing in the wintertime. And so I began working hard for me to start raising bees of winter physiology. And because there's just little resources available for me right now for my bees to get. So I need to start feeding them because I noticed, like I said, bees were dying in their cells. They were being cannibalized. They were drying up instead of becoming winter bees for me. So for me to raise bees of winter physiology means I can stimulate them to kind of think that there's a honey flow going on like in the spring. So they can consume this liquid. They can feel, good about getting nurse bees charged up with royal jelly and continue to raise more brood instead of going through this dearth gap going into winter. I like to have 6 or 8 frames full of brood like this to go into winter. That's what I need. So you have about 7,000 cells on a deep frame, 3,500 on both sides. They're not always filled out to the edge. But let's say, let's say be conservative, say 5,000 on a frame, including both sides. So if I have 6 to 8 frames, then I'm getting about almost 40,000 winter bees that I'm raising in the fall. If I can get those 6 to 8 frames of brood through feeding them in the fall, that's what I need to get through the winter with these winter bees. So I also did studies, and then, back then I found that water was collecting on the inner cover or the top cover. And as you can see, I took a picture of it. And so the humidity in the hive would rise up and collect there, the contrasting temperatures of the top cover and the outside world. So condensation develops on the warm side of anything, a tea glass, whatever. And then it would warm up in the daytime or a warm day and drip cold water back on my bees. I found out that was not good for them. And so I began working to solve that problem. I tried all kind of little experiments. Back then, we used plastic bags with little holes in the top. I tried feeding them pollen patties and everything. But what I finally came up with Winter Be Kind was I built a candy board that had insulation on the top, protein and all that. And I thought, okay, that's going to help us out a lot because my bees will be able to eat in the wintertime and enjoy this, this insulation from the top. And I would add things to these Winter Be Kinds. Now, Patrick, who's our camera guy today, made this video. He tried one of my Winter Be Kinds last winter. And what day was this? December 23rd?
December 23rd.
Yeah, December 23rd. And so just to give you an idea of feeding bees, this is the same mixture that I feed all the time. And I make it into a hard candy. We sell thousands of these to beekeepers. It's got a little hole there for ventilation. But in just a minute, when he gets his camera back up, you'll see what this looks like with the bees in there. So their insulation is in there. So this is in the middle of winter with this many bees. They've already eaten all the candy that was on that insulation. They've already consumed that. And so what I've found by using these, my bees eat about, well, some of my strong colonies will eat one of these a week, about 4 pounds a week. But some of them eat one a month, And so when they consume this, they're able to continue to raise more brood in the wintertime. Get this. This is when I had the most bees in my hive ever because I'm raising diutinous bees all winter. They don't die. In the summer, bees die because they work themselves to death. They live 45 days. I'm raising bees that live months. And so it just keeps getting more bees and more bees. I did little experiments with putting telemetry gathering devices in my Winter Be Kinds. It raised the temperature by almost 40 degrees by putting that Winter Be Kind from the outside, by putting the Winter Be Kind up there. They're eating that. It lowered the humidity from 98% outdoors to 64% inside. The humidity in the hive is absorbed in that candy. I'm going to talk about wrapping really quick, and then we can talk more about it. But the wrapping, you have the options of roofing paper. That's an old standby that everybody told me to use. And I was early into beekeeping and had really brown hair. Winter wrapping, I enjoyed buying foam board at the hardware stores, and I would cut it. And you cut it just right. It makes a hinge if you don't cut it all the way through. And I would wrap my hives like that. Similar to Peggy's new hive hugger. Hers is a little thicker and it's kind of a space age technology, I guess, but it's a wrap that you can wrap your hives in for the condensing hive approach. My most successful wrap so far has definitely been bat insulation, which surprised me. I just experimented with it one year. I thought, oh, it's going to get wet, the fiberglass insulation, but it didn't get wet. And I would staple it, tape it, and it worked really good on my hives. They seem to like that bat insulation most of all. So I do like that. It's kind of easy. You can save it every year and wrap it up again. You can buy wraps. This is some that I think is from maybe Dadant, I believe. Different prices, $40. I'll finish with this. I think wrapping hives actually is better for the beekeeper than the bees. I think it really makes the beekeeper feel better that their bees are wrapped. I think top insulation is a winner. Everybody agrees with that, I think. But we had the highest loss of bees last year, and yet we have more feeding options out there. We have high-tech wrap systems out there. We have so many things that are new, right, today, and yet we lost more bees than we ever have. Personally, I think all of those things help, but I think what helps the most is knowing bee biology, Having a thorough knowledge of beekeeping on honeybees is a game changer for winter survival. The more you understand bees and their biology, the more you're able to keep bees healthier. I promised we would have a giveaway. So tonight, Steve, you're going to have to think of some way that somebody can randomly be selected in the audience. Maybe throw a name in the hat or something. But for my live stream viewers that are watching tonight, thanks for watching me from Springfield, Illinois. I'm going to be giving away for you guys. Look at this. This is a great little tool you can use. Anybody here have trouble seeing eggs? Nobody wants to admit that. But this is a little device, a little jeweler's band that you can put on. It has magnifiers on it. And you can actually put it on your head. I've made videos on using this. Mark from Indiana showed us in a video a few weeks ago that he uses this. And I thought, oh, that's silly. And then I tried it. Oh my gosh. I no longer have to have the sun at my back and everything just right. I can just look through these little things under my bee suit and wow, you can see eggs. It helps me find the queen. All right, so we're going to have Robbie, one of our administrators on the live stream here tonight. Robbie, you want to set this up? You select some kind of a name that our viewers can try to win. It's called Lens, L-E-W, or L-E-N-S, hashtag L-E-N-S. So those of you watching from around the world, just go to your chat and type in Lens, and we'll pick a winner in just a moment. And for those of you that are here tonight, Steve's going to work out some little things that you can select to win something as well. So, all right. So finally, if you want to know more about me, there's a little QR code. You can find out my channel. I thank you for letting me come and speak to you tonight. It's been a ball. And for my live stream viewers, I want to thank you guys. We're going to be here right up until 8 o'clock on live stream here. Thank you for watching and coming with me. I know I didn't get to answer all your questions like we normally do, but we'll do that next week. So we really appreciate merging these two together, a live stream around the world. Right now, we have a little over 600 people watching from probably around the world, and then who's here as well. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. We're going to have a good time for questions in just a moment. So be thinking about any questions that you want to ask. All right, let's go ahead and see, Robbie, who might win our Lens tonight. We have an administrator, Robbie, setting things up for us on a giveaway, and we'll see who wins this set of lenses tonight. They come in different magnifications to help you out. You can get these on Amazon if you don't win one tonight. LENWS, here we go. All right. It's drawing a winner. Let's see who it'll be. Julie from New Mexico. All right. Congratulations, Julie. Be sure and email us. You'll need to email us within 24 hours at beaksquadwinner@gmail.com. Let us know you won the lenses, and we'll get those shipped out right to you. All right. Very good. Now let's take some questions from the audience today. I'll repeat your questions if you have any questions on the presentation. Yes.
What's your survival rate for your bees?
My survival rate is probably best around 75%. And the 25% is because I dropped the ball. I just didn't get them fed. I didn't get my winter bee kinds changed. Or sometimes I know they're not doing good in the fall and I hope they will, or I'm running experiments. We have a nuke yard that a gentleman cares for my nukes for me on, and he has 100% success rate on those 100 colonies. My problem with my YouTube studio yard is I always in there making videos, and I'm kind of careless sometimes with following up because I'm working hard to make 3 videos a week, so I don't always go out there and make it perfect. Yeah. All right, other questions? Yes.
Could you comment on, for general, beekeepers observing their hives, I try to encourage people to let their bees tell them what they need. Would you say that someone who sees a lot of pollen or bee bread in their hives at this time of year, would they need to feed a pollen substitute?
Okay, Jane asked a good question. Letting the bees tell us what they need, and if you look in your hive and you see a lot of bee bread or pollen that's stored, do they have enough protein to make it through winter? I think they do. Now, for me personally, I like to feed them anyway, because whatever is stored, I've observed that my bees, they don't like to go for what's stored right away. Like if they're wanting to raise brood, they may not go to what's stored, but they will always use what they are viewing as incoming to raise more brood. So that's what I'm trying to do. So you may see that difference, that they won't raise a lot of brood from stored things as they would if you're feeding them. In the fall, that's correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, you have another question?
I just was, one thing is I was wondering if you could provide us with a link that I could put up on the Facebook page that it shows us your presentation.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Steve wants us to give a link so we can show this presentation from his Facebook page. Absolutely, yeah. We have a lot of Facebook viewers right now watching from Facebook. So,
Well, that way, anybody that didn't make it tonight.
absolutely, yeah. Remind me to do that. We'll be happy to do that. Yeah. Yes.
So like in a 2D pad going into winter, do you still try and shoot for that 60 to 70 pound weight? Is that kind of a new?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I do. Like right now, I'm going to make sure all my hives have their hunt. Oh, the question is, do I still shoot for 70, 75 pounds of winter honey stores to make it through winter? I have probably 30 to 40 pounds of the food that's down in the deep area. And then I always go through the winter with one honey super that's capped over for them. I don't take every honey super off. I think all of the YouTube hives have a honey super with the exception of a couple. And even the ones that I feed them all, but even the ones that don't have the super that I feed my winter bee kinds to do equally as well as the ones that don't. So
you go over weight train in a deep and a medium?
two deeps and one medium honey super. Yeah. It works out really good for me. Sometimes they'll eat everything in the winter bee kind first and never touch the honey super. Sometimes they'll finish the honey super, then go up into the candy board. But every one of those will always go up into that super and fill it up with eggs in February and March, which is fine with me. I wait until they emerge, and then I just either work my queen down or put a queen excluder on. Yeah. Yes.
Did you treat your bees any differently this year during the drought?
Did I treat my bees any differently this year during the drought? There was some that were smaller because of queen issues or something, and I did feed them 1-to-1 sugar water during the drought. But no, I really didn't. I didn't provide extra shade or anything, and they all seemed to go through it pretty well. Yeah. Yes.
You making sugar water or syrup?
Yeah, it's to me, I don't really get that technical. If you have a more technical reason to call it one or the other, do I call it sugar water or syrup? I guess you could call it syrup because it's 1-to-1.
I meant, are you buying bulk sugar, making sugar water, or are you buying bulk syrup?
Oh no, I buy cane sugar, and then I mix it with my water to make sugar water. Yeah.
Where's it cheap at?
Nowhere. Nowhere. Sugar is not cheap anywhere. It's expensive to feed bees, but it's also expensive to replace bees too. Yeah. Yes.
When you're feeding the jars about this time of year, how long do you leave them on till?
Oh, I leave them on until the temperature in the daytime doesn't get above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Bees aren't really quick to go up there and get colder jars like that. So I'll go to the winter bee kind candy board when it gets where it's not going to go above 50. Bees cluster at around 50, so they're not as apt to drink the liquid water. And yeah, and they can't get out and take cleansing flights as easy either. Yeah. All right, I'm going to take a moment now and say thank you guys. Thank all of the viewers out there. We're right at the 8 o'clock hour. I want to thank everybody on the live stream. Let you know I really appreciate all you guys so much for being on the live stream tonight. Next Thursday, we'll be back in the studio, but thank you for joining us here in Springfield, Illinois, and appreciate you guys so much. And I'll see you in the next video.